Welcome to one of the most disturbing and unexplained stories buried deep in American history. Tonight we're traveling back to 19th century Mississippi, where two enslaved twin sisters lived lives so strange, so unsettling, that historians still argue about what really happened to them. Their story was whispered, never written clearly, and somehow erased from official records, yet fragments survived, hinting at a secret no one could ever explain. As you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect people across the world. And if you appreciate the deep research and real historical digging behind these dark narratives, subscribe, because uncovering the truth behind forgotten history takes serious time, effort, and respect for the facts. They were born on a humid Mississippi night when the plantation's quarters were heavy with heat and fear, and the women who helped with the birth knew immediately that something was different. Twin births were rare enough among the enslaved, but these two girls arrived almost unnervingly alike, as if one life had been split perfectly in half. The midwife whispered prayers under her breath, not only for the baby's survival, but for what such a birth might mean in a world that already treated life as property. From the moment they could be seen in daylight, the twins became a quiet spectacle among the enslaved community. Their faces mirrored each other so closely that even their own mother struggled to tell them apart at times. Elders remembered old African stories about twins being signs of power or warning, and those whispers followed the girls like shadows. In a system built on control and order, anything that felt symbolic or unexplained created unease. Plantation records noted their birth briefly, reducing two lives to a single line of ink, listing them together as if they were one asset instead of two children. No names were carefully chosen for them, no individuality acknowledged. To the owner, they represented labor that would double in time, but to the people who watched them grow, they were something far more unsettling, a reminder that nature itself could defy ownership. As infants, the twins rarely cried separately. If one fell ill, the other weakened within hours, even when they were kept apart. Women in the quarters noticed that the girls often moved in unison, turning their heads at the same moment or reaching out with matching gestures. These small details were passed along in hushed conversations, careful not to reach the ears of overseers who punished superstition as rebellion. Their mother lived in constant fear that the twins would be sold apart, a fate common and cruel in Mississippi's slave markets. She begged quietly for them to remain together, offering extra labor and silent obedience in exchange for a promise never spoken aloud. The idea of separating them felt wrong even to those who believed in nothing beyond survival, as if tearing them apart would invite something terrible. As the twins grew into early childhood, their bond only deepened. They learned to walk at the same time, spoke their first words within days of each other, and seemed to understand commands without being taught twice. Overseers took notice, not with wonder, but with suspicion, questioning whether such closeness could hide disobedience or shared secrets. By the time the girls were old enough to be assigned small tasks, their birth was no longer just a memory. It was the beginning of a reputation. Other enslaved workers avoided speaking their names aloud, and even the plantation owner reportedly remarked that he had never seen anything like them in all his years. What began as a rare twin birth under enslavement slowly became the first thread in a mystery that Mississippi history would never fully explain. Mississippi during the plantation era was a land shaped by heat, cotton fields, and absolute control, where every sunrise marked another day of forced labor. The twins grew up surrounded by endless rows of crops and the constant crack of overseers' voices, a world where freedom was an unspoken dream and survival depended on obedience. From childhood, they learned the rhythms of the plantation, the bell that dictated when to wake, when to work, and when to collapse into restless sleep. The plantation itself functioned like a small, brutal kingdom. The owner's house stood high and distant, while the enslaved quarters were packed tightly together, offering little privacy and even less safety. Children were raised communally, watched over by exhausted adults who carried both care and fear in their eyes. For the twins, this environment shaped every part of their identity, binding them not only to each other, but to a system designed to erase individuality. Work began early. Even before their bodies were fully grown, the twins were assigned light tasks, carrying water, sorting cotton, running messages between fields. Overseers observed them closely, noting their efficiency and the strange way they anticipated each other's movements. In a place where any deviation from routine was punished, their silent coordination drew both admiration and quiet distrust. Religion on the plantation was tightly controlled, stripped of hope, and used as a tool of submission. Sermons preached obedience, while African spiritual traditions were forbidden. Still, elders whispered old beliefs in the dark, telling stories of ancestors and hidden strength. The twins listened closely, absorbing these fragments of identity that survived despite attempts to erase them, and those stories would later fuel rumors about who or what they truly were. Violence was constant but often invisible, woven into daily life. Punishments were carried out publicly to remind everyone of their place, and fear became a language understood without words. The twins learned early to stay close, to move carefully, and to speak only when necessary. In this environment, their bond was not just emotional, it was a strategy for survival. The plantation economy depended on division, yet the twins resisted it simply by existing together. They were never separated into different work groups, partly because the overseers found it easier to manage them as a pair. This unintentional allowance only deepened their connection, making them seem inseparable in a world that thrived on breaking families apart. By the time they reached adolescence, the Mississippi plantation era had carved itself into their spirits. They understood power, cruelty, and silence in ways no child ever should. And within this harsh landscape, the twins' shared existence stood out as something rare, a quiet defiance against a system that demanded isolation, setting the stage for the mysteries that would follow. As the twins grew older, their identical appearance became impossible to ignore, even for those trained to see enslaved people as interchangeable. They shared the same height, the same narrow scars from fieldwork, and the same steady gaze that made overseers uneasy. At a distance, even the plantation owner reportedly struggled to tell them apart, an unsettling problem in a system that depended on strict identification and control. Despite looking exactly alike, the twins were quietly assigned different roles as they entered their teenage years. One was kept closer to the main house, tasked with cleaning, carrying meals, and observing the daily routines of the White family. The other remained in the fields, enduring long hours under the sun, surrounded by laborers and overseers. This separation was meant to break their bond, yet it only sharpened the strange contrast between their lives. Those who watched them noticed something unsettling. Even while working apart, the twins seemed aware of each other's experiences. If the sister in the fields was punished, the one near the house grew visibly shaken, sometimes refusing food or becoming ill without explanation. When the house servant overheard secrets or sensed danger, her working sister became unusually cautious the same day, as if warned without words. Their different roles gave them access to separate worlds within the same plantation. One heard whispered conversations about finances, sales, and punishments, while the other absorbed the raw suffering of the fields. When they met at night, their exchanges were brief and careful. Yet the knowledge they shared seemed to flow effortlessly, as though spoken conversation was barely necessary. Overseers began to suspect that the twins were exploiting their resemblance. There were accusations that they switched places to avoid punishment or gain small advantages, though no one ever proved it. The fear was not just about rule breaking. It was about losing certainty, about not knowing which twin stood before them at any given moment. Among the enslaved community, the twins' dual roles inspired both hope and caution. Some believed they were protected by something unseen, able to survive where others were crushed. Others worried that their uniqueness would draw dangerous attention, that standing out in Mississippi's plantation system was an invitation to cruelty. In the end, the twins' identical faces and divided lives created a quiet imbalance in the plantation's order. They existed in two worlds at once, connected by blood and something deeper that no overseer could monitor. That contradiction, one body mirrored in another, living different lives, only deepened the mystery that history would never fully explain. Rumors about the twins began quietly, passed in low voices between overseers who rarely admitted fear. At first, it was small things, tools going missing and reappearing in places already searched, gates found unlatched without footprints nearby. Whenever confusion spread across the plantation, one of the twins was usually nearby, standing silently, offering no explanation and drawing no attention to herself. Some overseers claimed the twins spoke to each other without moving their lips. Others swore they had seen one sister in the fields and, moments later, near the main house, too quickly for any person to travel that distance. These stories were often dismissed during the day, laughed off as exhaustion or heat playing tricks on the mind, but at night the same men slept uneasily, replaying what they thought they had seen. The fear grew stronger whenever punishment was involved. More than one overseer reported feeling watched while disciplining one twin, only to turn and find the other standing nearby, her expression unreadable. Even when records showed the sisters were assigned to different locations, witnesses insisted they had seen both at once, a claim that defied reason and threatened the authority of those in charge. Attempts were made to catch the twins in wrongdoing. Overseers questioned them separately, asking the same questions in hopes of finding contradictions. Instead, the sisters' answers always aligned perfectly, delivered calmly and without hesitation. This precision only deepened suspicion, as if the twins had rehearsed conversations that no one else had heard. Among the white staff, rumors took on a darker tone. Some whispered that the twins were cursed, others that they practiced forbidden rituals learned from older enslaved workers. A few even suggested they shared one soul between two bodies, an idea rooted more in fear than belief, yet powerful enough to unsettle hardened men. The enslaved community sensed the danger these rumors created. People avoided being seen too close to the twins, afraid that association would bring punishment. Yet in private, some believed the rumors were exaggerated to justify future cruelty, a familiar pattern in Mississippi's slave system where fear was often weaponized. By the time the plantation owner became aware of the gossip, it was already out of control. What began as whispered unease among overseers had grown into a belief that the twins were more than obedient laborers. And in a world where unexplained behavior was treated as rebellion, rumors alone were enough to seal a fate, pushing the mystery of the twin sisters into even darker territory. The twins' secret nighttime movements began almost imperceptibly, a pattern noticed only by those who were paying the closest attention. Long after the fields were empty and the plantation fell silent under the heavy Mississippi moon, the girls would slip from their quarters with a quiet precision that made no sound on the wooden floors. They moved like shadows, their feet barely disturbing the dust, as if the night itself bent to their will. Neighbors in the quarters first noticed small anomalies. Objects shifted slightly. Chores that had been left undone were mysteriously completed, and the faintest traces of footprints appeared in the dirt only to vanish before sunrise. The enslaved women whispered about the twins' abilities, half in awe, half in fear, suggesting they were guided by something beyond natural understanding. Even the older children learned to tread lightly when the twins were out at night, for fear of being caught in whatever secret business was unfolding. The overseer's suspicion grew as the girls seemed to anticipate every inspection. Tasks assigned to one sister were completed more efficiently than possible, as if they had insider knowledge of expectations. At night, when doors were bolted and windows shuttered, the twins' presence was occasionally noted by distant lights or fleeting shadows, seen by those who were desperate to maintain control yet powerless to explain the phenomenon. Their nighttime routines were never observed directly, leaving only traces and rumors. Clothes left hanging would be rearranged. Messages meant for one overseer sometimes appeared where the other would discover them first. The enslaved workers began speculating that the twins were not merely moving in secret, they were communicating across the plantation in ways no one could comprehend. Some believed it was a kind of silent resistance, a quiet rebellion that escaped notice yet undermined authority. Even the plantation owner noticed subtle irregularities. Reports of missing tools, sudden small repairs, or unexplainable organization in the fields became too frequent to ignore. Yet when searches were conducted, no one could catch the twins in action. It was as if their movements existed in a space between what could be seen and what was imagined, further feeding the air of unease that clung to them like a second skin. The community of enslaved workers treated the twins' nocturnal habits with a mixture of fear and reverence. Some believed the sisters were blessed or cursed, with powers inherited from African ancestors, capable of bending reality in small but undeniable ways. Others were careful not to ask questions, recognizing that curiosity could invite punishment or draw dangerous attention from overseers already unnerved by the twins' unexplained abilities. By adolescence, the twins' night movements were no longer merely a habit, they had become a defining aspect of their existence. The secrecy, coordination, and precision of their actions reinforced the growing legend that surrounded them. Even decades later, accounts of these nighttime behaviors were whispered in fragmented histories, leaving historians and locals alike puzzled, unsure of what truly occurred under the cover of Mississippi darkness. The historical records about the twins were frustratingly incomplete, leaving gaping holes that no researcher could ever fully reconcile. Plantation ledgers, letters, and sales records mentioned them only in passing, reducing their existence to a single line or a vague reference, as if their lives were too extraordinary or too dangerous to document fully. This absence of information created a vacuum in which speculation and rumor flourished. Oral histories passed down by former enslaved people told fragments of their lives, snippets about their uncanny closeness, whispered warnings about their strange behaviors, and stories of events the written record ignored entirely. Yet these accounts often conflicted, offering glimpses into the twins' existence from different perspectives, but never a cohesive narrative. Each telling added another layer to the mystery, leaving researchers and historians both intrigued and frustrated. Overseers' notes and plantation documents sometimes contradicted each other. One might claim that the twins were in separate locations all day, while another insisted they had been seen together in ways that were physically impossible. These inconsistencies only fueled speculation that the sisters had abilities beyond human understanding, or that their presence somehow altered perception itself. The twins' disappearance from official records during critical years of their youth raised even more questions. No sales receipts, no punishment logs, and no labor assignments could be traced after certain points, leaving historians to wonder if their removal from documentation was intentional. Some theorized the owner or overseers had deliberately erased them from records, fearful of the growing legend surrounding the sisters. Letters and diaries from visitors to the plantation occasionally referenced the girls who were always together, hinting at the twins' presence, but never providing identifying details. These fragments, tantalizing in their ambiguity, suggested that outsiders recognized something remarkable about the pair, but could not articulate it, either out of fear or social decorum. This lack of clear documentation turned the twins into figures who existed more in myth than in history. They were alive in the memories of those who had worked beside them, but almost invisible on paper, a paradox that made them endlessly fascinating to anyone trying to reconstruct their lives. The absence of explanation became part of their identity, as if the mystery itself was the only truth historians could reliably trace. Even today, researchers studying Mississippi's slave-era plantations encounter this frustrating void. No matter how deep the investigation official documents remain incomplete, leaving the twin sisters' story fragmented and unresolved. And it is precisely this gap, the missing evidence, the conflicting accounts, the shadows in historical memory, that has preserved the twins' reputation as an unsolved enigma in American history. Fear within the plantation grew quietly, a tension that seemed to follow the twins wherever they went. The enslaved workers, who already lived under constant stress and scrutiny, began to speak in hushed tones about the girls, wary that even acknowledging them might invite punishment. Their uncanny coordination and closeness inspired awe, but it also bred unease, as if the twins carried an invisible power that could not be controlled or predicted. Overseers, who prided themselves on maintaining order, found themselves unnerved by the twins' behavior. Even small gestures, a shared glance, a nod at the same moment, or completing tasks in perfect synchrony, were enough to make experienced men question what they were seeing. Rumors began to circulate that the twins were capable of influencing events around them, bending the routine of the plantation in ways no one could explain. The enslaved community, though accustomed to secrecy and subtle resistance, treated the twins differently. Some avoided them, fearing the attention that proximity might bring from the overseers. Others watched from a distance, curious and respectful, sensing that the twins possessed knowledge or abilities that could neither be fully understood nor safely discussed. This mix of admiration and fear created a palpable tension that hung over the quarters like a storm cloud. Even the plantation owner, reportedly, noticed the growing unease. While outwardly dismissing it as superstition, he quietly monitored the twins, aware that the smallest disruption to the established order could have serious consequences. The girls' presence, it seemed, challenged the very hierarchy upon which the plantation depended, highlighting cracks that no amount of authority could fully seal. Punishments became more complicated around the twins. Overseers were hesitant to enforce discipline too harshly, worried that the girls' inexplicable reactions might provoke unforeseen consequences. They spoke in whispers about their strange resilience and unusual responses, unsure whether they were witnessing clever defiance, coincidence, or something far more mysterious. The twins' influence extended beyond direct observation. Small acts of disruption, like missing tools mysteriously appearing in unexpected places or chores completed with unusual efficiency, fed the perception that the girls were not ordinary enslaved workers. Fear, more than admiration, became the defining response to their presence, creating a subtle power dynamic that the plantation hierarchy could not fully control. By the time the twins reached adolescence, the aura of fear surrounding them was undeniable. Their mere presence altered behavior, changed routines, and left both enslaved and overseers alike questioning the boundaries of control. In a world built on strict obedience and predictable patterns, the twins embodied uncertainty, and that fear, silent yet pervasive, became one of the first threads in a mystery that history would never fully unravel. The missing historical records surrounding the twins only deepened the air of mystery that clung to their lives. Official plantation logs, which carefully documented births, deaths, and labor assignments for most enslaved people, contained barely a mention of the sisters. When they did appear, it was only as a pair, with no distinction between them, as if one life had been erased in favor of the other. This lack of documentation made it nearly impossible for historians to reconstruct their daily experiences. Even letters and diaries from the plantation owner or overseers provided little clarity. Mentions of the girls, or the twins, were vague, sometimes contradicting each other, and often seemed to avoid recording anything truly remarkable. It was as if those who kept records were wary of acknowledging the sisters' unique behaviors, perhaps sensing that the truth could not be explained or controlled. The absence of records became especially noticeable during key moments in their lives. There was no documentation of the girls' adolescence, no indication of when they transitioned from children to laborers, and no clear account of events that could have explained their strange reputation. Each missing piece left room for speculation, allowing stories and rumors to take root among both the enslaved community and those in authority. Oral histories preserved fragments of the twins' existence, but these accounts often conflicted. Some remembered the sisters as clever and resourceful, able to anticipate danger and manipulate small situations to their advantage. Others described them as eerie and almost supernatural, capable of movements or coordination that seemed impossible. These contradictory recollections, passed down in hushed tones, filled the gaps left by the absent records, but created a puzzle that no historian could completely solve. Even visitors to the plantation left incomplete impressions. Traders, neighbors, and transient overseers occasionally mentioned the twins in passing, noting their closeness or unusual behavior, but never provided substantial detail. Their observations were fleeting, fragmented snapshots that hinted at a story far larger than anyone could document, as if the twins existed just beyond the reach of conventional record keeping. The gaps in the historical record also meant that any attempt to trace the twins' later lives became almost impossible. Researchers could find no evidence of whether they were sold, escaped, or remained on the plantation into adulthood. These missing records reinforced the sense that the sisters had somehow slipped through the cracks of history, leaving behind only whispers and legends. Ultimately, the lack of documentation transformed the twins from ordinary enslaved individuals into enduring enigmas. Their lives, largely invisible to official accounts, became defined by what was missing rather than what was recorded. This absence, paradoxically, has preserved their legend, leaving future generations to wonder at the strange and unsettling presence of Mississippi's most mysterious twin sisters. Fully expand Dettley's 7-paragraph, no-heading keynote 9. Witness testimonies about the twins were as fragmented as the historical records themselves, often contradictory and filled with uncertainty. Those who had worked alongside them remembered moments that could not be explained by logic or routine. Some claimed to see the sisters in 2 places at once, moving in perfect coordination, as if sharing one mind, while others insisted they had observed behaviors that suggested the girls knew things before they happened. Overseers who attempted to document their actions often found themselves at a loss. Their reports varied wildly. One account might describe the twins performing chores in impeccable unison, while another claimed that they had deliberately avoided tasks in ways that seemed impossible to coordinate. These inconsistencies left historians wondering whether the testimonies were influenced by fear superstition, or genuine unexplainable phenomena. Among the enslaved workers, the twins' reputation grew with each passing year. Some described them as almost otherworldly, capable of subtle manipulations that kept them safe while others suffered. Witnesses spoke of the girls anticipating danger, warning each other silently, and sometimes conveying information without speaking a word. The testimonies suggested a bond so intense that it transcended ordinary understanding, leaving those who observed it both awed and frightened. Conflicting stories arose even within families. A mother might recount seeing one twin switch places with the other to escape punishment, while another relative insisted the girls had never left their assigned locations. These conflicting accounts made it impossible to separate truth from embellishment, adding to the aura of mystery that surrounded their lives. Some outsiders who visited the plantation recorded brief impressions, noting the twins' identical appearance and unusual behavior. Traders and neighbors often found themselves unnerved by the girls' coordination and silence, leaving only fragments of evidence about what they had witnessed. Even casual remarks hinted at a sense of intelligence and cunning that went beyond what was expected of children their age, let alone enslaved twins in the 19th century. The scarcity of detailed, consistent testimonies meant that any narrative about the twins had to be pieced together like a puzzle, with each fragment subject to interpretation. Researchers and storytellers were forced to rely on hints, rumors, and contradictory accounts, creating a story more legend than documented fact. Yet, even in these imperfect testimonies, a clear pattern emerged: the twins inspired awe, fear, and fascination in everyone who encountered them. Ultimately, the conflicting witness accounts became part of the mystery itself. The twins existed in a space where observation and imagination blurred, leaving future generations with questions that could never be fully answered. Their story lived on in whispers and fragmented memories, a haunting reminder that some secrets resist explanation. Even centuries later, the twins' sudden disappearance became one of the most baffling aspects of their story, leaving everyone on the plantation, and later historians, puzzled. One morning, they simply could not be found. Their quarters were empty, their belongings untouched, and no trail of footprints led into the surrounding fields or nearby roads. The overseers were frantic, searching every corner of the plantation, yet there was no sign of where the sisters had gone. Panic spread quietly among the enslaved workers, who feared punishment for knowledge they did not have. Some whispered that the twins had been sold secretly, taken to another plantation under the cover of night. Others feared something darker, believing that the girls had vanished through means no one could understand, leaving behind an aura of supernatural mystery. The tension lingered for weeks as everyone speculated about what had happened. The plantation owner reportedly offered rewards to anyone who could provide information, yet no one came forward. Even the most observant workers, who had seen the twins' secret movements and coordinated actions for years, had no explanation. It was as if the sisters had disappeared intentionally, slipping past the watchful eyes of those who had monitored them so closely for so long. Local neighbors and traders eventually heard of the disappearance, adding their own interpretations. Rumors spread that the twins had escaped together, using knowledge gained from their years of observation and coordination. Some even claimed that they had vanished without a trace, leaving only a lingering fear and fascination in the hearts of those who remained behind. Historians attempting to trace their lives later found only fragmented clues, vague mentions in letters, brief references in plantation records, and conflicting oral histories. No one could confirm whether the twins had survived, been sold, or met some other fate. The suddenness of their disappearance became an essential part of their legend, transforming them from remarkable individuals into enduring enigmas. The mystery of their vanishing also affected the plantation itself. Overseers became even more fearful and erratic, unsure whether similar disappearances could happen again. The enslaved workers spoke more cautiously, understanding that even small acts of defiance could invite suspicion or punishment. The twins' absence left a vacuum of uncertainty that reshaped the behavior and mindset of everyone who had known them. Even centuries later, the sudden disappearance of the twins remains one of the most confounding aspects of their story. It defies conventional explanations and leaves historians and storytellers grappling with questions that may never have answers. Their vanishing became a defining moment in the narrative of Mississippi's most mysterious enslaved sisters, a haunting reminder of the secrets that history often cannot fully reveal. Oral history and written records painted two very different pictures of the twins, creating a tension that has baffled historians for generations. Within the enslaved community, stories of their lives were passed quietly from one generation to the next. These accounts emphasized their intelligence, uncanny coordination, and mysterious abilities, often attributing supernatural qualities to events that were otherwise inexplicable. Elders would warn children about the twins, speaking in hushed tones, blending fact and legend into narratives meant to teach, protect, and remember. Written records, on the other hand, were sparse and often dismissive. Plantation ledgers reduced the twins to brief mentions, noting them as labor units rather than individuals. Letters from the owner or overseers rarely detailed their actions, and when they did, the accounts conflicted with one another and with oral histories. The official documentation seemed determined to erase the extraordinary elements of their existence, leaving only the mundane details that suited the plantation's rigid bureaucracy. This contrast between oral and written histories created gaps that allowed the twins' legend to grow. Stories told at night in the quarters often described incidents that official records never acknowledged, instances of shared knowledge, premonitions, or inexplicable coordination that gave the girls a reputation as something more than human. These whispered narratives kept the twins alive in memory, even as formal records attempted to bury them in anonymity. Conflicts between the two forms of history were common. One oral account might recount the twins escaping punishment through clever deception, while written records insisted they had been obedient and compliant. Some historians speculated that oral history preserved truth, while written records reflected the biases or fears of those in power. Yet the discrepancies also made it impossible to determine what had truly occurred, leaving the story perpetually shrouded in uncertainty. The tension also shaped how subsequent generations interpreted the twins' lives. Scholars, storytellers, and local residents often had to choose which sources to prioritize, balancing skepticism with respect for the testimonies of enslaved people. This dynamic reinforced the idea that the twins existed both as historical figures and as symbols embodying resistance, mystery, and the unexplained within Mississippi's painful past. Even within the oral histories, details varied with each retelling. Some emphasized the twins' closeness and identical appearance, while others highlighted their cleverness or the fear they inspired. This fluidity allowed each listener or storyteller to reshape the narrative to fit their understanding, yet it also preserved the core sense of awe and wonder that surrounded the sisters, ensuring their story endured despite the gaps in formal documentation. Ultimately, the clash between oral and written history became a defining feature of the twins' story. They existed simultaneously in memory and in omission, in legend and in partial fact. This duality ensured that the mystery of the enslaved twin sisters could never be fully explained, leaving their lives and the secrets they carried forever suspended between what was recorded and what was remembered. The mystery of the twins was never resolved, and that uncertainty has haunted historians and storytellers for generations. Even after decades of research, no definitive explanation could account for their strange coordination, secretive nighttime movements, or the sudden disappearance that erased them from the plantation's daily life. Every attempt to piece together their story uncovered only fragments, contradictions, and unanswered questions, reinforcing the idea that some histories resist explanation entirely. Local legends grew around the twins, blending fear, admiration, and superstition. People spoke of them as though they existed outside the normal laws of the world, capable of acts that no ordinary person could accomplish. These tales, though unverifiable, persisted because the sisters' presence had left an indelible impression on all who had known them, both enslaved workers and overseers alike. Their legend became a ghostly thread woven into the fabric of Mississippi history. Even contemporary historians struggle to reconcile what little documentation exists with the oral testimonies passed down through generations. Every ledger, letter, or diary raises more questions than it answers. Was their remarkable coordination the result of clever strategy, a psychological bond, or something beyond comprehension? No evidence can definitively confirm any theory, leaving their story in a perpetual state of speculation. The lack of resolution has allowed the twins' story to endure in the collective imagination. Writers, folklorists, and YouTubers alike return to their tale because it embodies the unknowable, a reminder that history is not just a series of dates and documents, but a living archive of mysteries, secrets, and human experiences that defy easy explanation. Their lives, largely invisible to official records, are immortalized precisely because they cannot be fully explained. The unanswered questions surrounding the twins also highlight the broader reality of slavery. In Mississippi, countless lives were erased, altered, or obscured, leaving historians to reconstruct narratives from incomplete and biased sources. In this sense, the twins' mystery is emblematic of a system designed to dehumanize and control, yet one that could not suppress the individuality, intelligence, and resilience of those it sought to dominate. Even centuries later, the fascination with the twins endures because of what remains unknown. Their story invites curiosity, speculation, and investigation, encouraging people to confront the limits of historical knowledge. The sisters are remembered not only for the strangeness of their lives, but for the way their absence from records forces us to question the completeness of what we call history. Ultimately, the unresolved nature of their story ensures that the twin sisters will never be forgotten. They exist in the intersection of legend and reality, of fact and speculation, haunting the memory of Mississippi and the imagination of anyone who encounters their tale. Their secret, bizarre, unexplainable, and enduring, remains locked in the shadows of history, a puzzle that may never be solved.